They expected her to scream. They expected her to beg, to cry, to throw a vase against the wall. But when Matteo told Elisa he was trading her in for a younger model, she didn't make a sound. She simply packed her bags in terrified silence. Matteo and his mother laughed as the door clicked shut, thinking she was defeated, a nobody destined for the streets. They were wrong. Less than 4 hours later, a photo surfaced on Twitter that broke the internet. The quiet housewife wasn't crying in a motel. She was sitting at the most exclusive table in New York City, clinking glasses with a man so private and powerful that even Wall Street trembles at his name. And that silence. That was just the calm before the storm. The loudest sound in the penthouse apartment was the screech of packing tape being ripped across a cardboard box. It was a harsh tearing noise that seemed to echo off the marble floors and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray Seattle skyline. Elisa Vance smoothed the tape down over the flaps of the box. Her hands were steady, though her knuckles were white. She didn't look up. She didn't look at the panoramic view she had cleaned every day for 3 years. She didn't look at the man standing by the granite kitchen island swirling a glass of scotch. Nor did she look at the older woman sitting on the velvet sofa flipping through a magazine with feigned disinterest. "You're taking the coffee maker." Matteo laughed a sharp, incredulous bark. "Really, Elisa, I bought that for the house. It's a Breville. Put it back." Elisa didn't speak. She simply reached into the box, pulled out the stainless steel machine, and set it on the counter with a soft thud. Then she sealed the box. "God, she's pathetic," Linda Matteo's mother muttered, turning a page. "Not even a fight. I told you, Matteo, she has no backbone. She knows she's nothing without you. That's why she's leaving like a mouse." Matteo took a sip of his drink, his eyes scanning Elisa's figure. She was wearing faded jeans and a simple gray sweater. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired but efficient. "I'm doing you a favor, Elle," Matteo said, his voice dropping to that condescending tone he used when he explained finances to her. "Chloe is moving in on Monday. It wouldn't be right for you to be here. She's different. She needs the space. She's young, vibrant. She fits the brand image I'm building." Matteo was the CEO of Vantage Tech, a mid-level startup that had recently seen a massive influx of capital. With the money came the ego, and with the ego came the desire to shed the starter wife. Technically, they weren't married. Elisa had been his partner for 7 years, supporting him when he was coding in a basement, paying the bills with her waitressing tips. But he never bought a ring. He always said it wasn't the right time. Now the time was right for Chloe, a 22-year-old Instagram model who Matteo met at a launch party in Miami. "You have an hour," Matteo said, checking his Rolex. "The cleaners are coming to sterilize the place. I don't want any trace of your clutter left behind." Elisa moved to the hallway. She had 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. That was it. 7 years of life reduced to the trunk of a sedan. "Where will you even go?" Linda asked, peering over her reading glasses. "Back to that trailer park in Ohio. Or are you going to beg for your old job back at the diner? I hear they're hiring dishwashers." Elisa paused. She stood by the heavy oak door, her hand on the brass handle. For a second, the air in the room grew heavy. Matteo stepped forward, expecting a retort, perhaps hoping for one so he could have the satisfaction of crushing her verbally one last time. Elisa turned her head slightly. She looked Matteo dead in the eye. Her expression wasn't sad. It wasn't angry. It was totally, terrifyingly blank. It was the face of someone who had already mourned the death of a relationship years ago and was just now attending the funeral. She opened the door. "Goodbye, Matteo," she whispered. It was barely audible. Then she walked out. The door clicked shut with a finality that made Matteo flinch. "Good riddance," Linda scoffed, throwing the magazine onto the table. "Finally, we can breathe in here." Matteo stared at the door, a strange knot forming in his stomach. He shook it off. He was rich, he was young, and he was free. "Yeah," he said, turning back to his scotch. "She's gone. And she's never coming back." He had no idea how right he was. It was raining when Elisa stepped onto the curb. The Seattle drizzle was cold seeping into her sweater, but she didn't feel it. She hailed a cab, not an Uber. She didn't want to use the account linked to Mateo's credit card, and the yellow car screeched to a halt. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked, eyeing her meager belongings. Elisa took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a burner phone she had bought with cash 2 days ago. She looked at a text message that had been sent to her that morning. It contained a single address. "Take me to the private airfield in King County," she said softly. The driver raised an eyebrow in the rearview mirror. "The airfield you catch in a charter looks like you're dressed for the bus station, no offense." "Just drive, please." The ride took 40 minutes. Elisa spent the time staring out the window watching the city blur. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. Mateo thought she was a simple waitress he had saved. He thought her silence was submission. He didn't know about the emails. He didn't know about the project she had been working on every night while he was asleep, the coding patches she had fixed for his competitors under a pseudonym. And he certainly didn't know about Johnny. When the taxi pulled up to the private terminal, the driver's jaw dropped. Parked on the tarmac, gleaming under the floodlights, was a Gulfstream G650ER. It was matte black, sleek, and looked like a predator waiting to pounce. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was a man in a tuxedo holding a large umbrella. That's for you," the driver stammered. Elisa handed him a $100 bill. "Keep the change." She stepped out into the rain, but before a drop could touch her, the man with the umbrella was there. "Ms. Vance," the man said with a slight bow. "Mr. Sterling is waiting inside. He was concerned the traffic might have delayed you." "I'm here, Alfred," Elisa said, her voice stronger now. "Load the boxes, but be careful with the blue one. It has the hard drives." "Understood." Elisa walked up the stairs and ducked into the cabin. The interior smelled of expensive leather and bergamot. Sitting in a cream-colored swivel chair reviewing documents on a tablet was a man who looked like he had been carved out of marble. He had silver-streaked dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and an aura of power that sucked the oxygen out of the room. This was Johnny Sterling. To the public, he was a myth, a venture capitalist who had funded half of Silicon Valley in the 90s and then vanished into the shadows. He didn't give interviews. He didn't have social media. He was the money behind the money. He was the man Elon Musk called when he needed advice. He looked up as Elisa entered. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "You left him," Johnny stated. It wasn't a question. "I did," Elisa replied, sinking into the seat across from him. "Did you sign the NDA he tried to force on you?" "No, I left it on the counter, along with the ring he bought for the mistress." Johnny closed his tablet. "Good. Then you are a free agent." He signaled to the stewardess, who immediately brought a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "We have a reservation at Per Se in New York in 5 hours. I took the liberty of having a wardrobe sent to the plane. You cannot dine with me wearing that." Elisa looked down at her sweater. "Mateo said I looked like a maid." "Mateo is a fool who is about to lose 40% of his company's market share due to a patent infringement he doesn't even know exists yet," Johnny said calmly. "But tonight isn't about business, Elisa. It's about the debut." "Are you sure about this, Johnny?" Elisa asked, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "Once we step out there, once we are seen, there is no going back. Mateo will know. Everyone will know." Johnny leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Elisa, you spent 7 years hiding your brilliance to make a small man feel big. You ghost-wrote his code. You designed his architecture. You built his empire while he took the credit and treated you like a servant. It is time the world sees who the real architect is." He poured the champagne. The bubbles danced in the crystal flute. "Besides," Johnny added, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips, "I have heard the risotto at Per Se is excellent this time of year, and I have arranged for a specific photographer to be present. One who sells to TMZ, The Shade Room, and Daily Mail simultaneously." Elisa took the glass. The fear in her chest began to dissolve, replaced by a cold, burning fire. She thought of Mateo's laugh. She thought of Linda's sneer. "To silence," Elisa said, raising her glass. "To the storm," Johnny corrected. They clinked glasses as the jet engines roared to life, lifting them away from the rain and toward a vengeance that would be served not just cold but globally viral. The Gulfstream touched down at Teterboro Airport just as the sun was beginning to set over the Manhattan skyline, painting the city in hues of burnt orange and violet. Inside the cabin, the transformation was complete. Elisa stood before the full-length mirror in the jet's private stateroom. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. The worn gray sweater and jeans were gone, replaced by a gown that cost more than Mateo's car. It was a midnight blue velvet dress off the shoulder, hugging her figure with a sophistication she had forgotten she possessed. It didn't just fit, it armored her. A team of stylists flown in from Paris on Johnny's dime had spent the last 2 hours on her hair and makeup. Her chestnut hair was no longer in a messy bun, but cascaded in soft, glossy waves down one shoulder. Her makeup was subtle but sharp, a smoky eye that highlighted the amber flecks in her irises and a deep crimson lip that signaled danger. "You look," Johnny said, his voice coming from the doorway, "like you own the city." Elisa turned. Johnny had changed as well. He wore a bespoke tuxedo cut perfectly to his broad shoulders, no tie the top button of his crisp white shirt undone. He looked effortless, the kind of wealthy that doesn't need to shout because the silence speaks for itself. Around his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch that was likely one of only 5 in the world. "I feel like an imposter," Elisa admitted, her hand trembling as she touched the diamond necklace resting against her collarbone. "Johnny, 3 hours ago I was packing a toaster into a cardboard box. Now I'm wearing diamonds. Mateo used to say I looked best in sweatpants because fancy didn't suit my station." Johnny walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was electric. "Mateo wanted a servant, Elisa. He wanted someone small so he could feel tall. Tonight we are going to show him exactly how small he really is. You are not an imposter. You are the woman who wrote the algorithm that saved his supply chain logistics last year. I checked the metadata. I know it was you." Elisa's eyes widened. You checked the code. I check everything." Johnny smiled a wolfish, confident grin. "I don't invest in people unless I know their value. And you, Elisa Vance, are undervalued. Tonight is the IPO." They descended the stairs of the plane to a waiting Rolls-Royce Phantom. The ride into the city was smooth, the interior of the car silent as a tomb. Elisa watched the lights of New York flicker past. She felt a strange sense of dissociation, as if the woman in the window wasn't her, but a character she was playing. The Avenger. The car pulled up to the Time Warner Center at Columbus Circle. Per se, Thomas Keller's legendary restaurant was their destination. But as the car slowed, Elisa saw the lights. Flashes. Dozens of them. A swarm of photographers was gathered near the entrance. "Did you tell them we were coming?" Elisa whispered, panic rising in her throat. "I may have leaked a tip that Johnny Sterling was dining with a mystery partner regarding a hostile takeover," Johnny said nonchalantly. "The financial press is here. The tabloids followed. They think you're a business mogul from Europe. Or royalty. Let's not disappoint them." The chauffeur opened the door. The noise of the city rushed in, sirens honking and the sudden aggressive shouting of the paparazzi. "Mr. Sterling over here. Johnny, who's the girl? Look this way." Johnny stepped out first. The flashes went crazy, illuminating the night like lightning. He buttoned his jacket calmly, then turned and extended his hand into the dark interior of the car. Elisa took a breath. "Goodbye, Mouse. Hello, Storm." She took his hand and stepped out. The silence that followed was momentary but palpable. The photographers paused for a fraction of a second, stunned by the sheer elegance of the woman standing next to the elusive billionaire. Then the shutters went into overdrive. Click, 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 click. Elisa didn't look down. She didn't hide her face. She remembered Mateo's mother calling her pathetic. She lifted her chin, her expression cool and detached, channeling every ounce of pain into a look of regal indifference. She looked straight into the lens of the closest camera, her eyes piercing. Johnny placed a hand on the small of her back, protective, possessive, and intimate. He leaned in close to her ear, a move that the cameras ate up. "Walk slow," he whispered. "Let them get the shot. This is the photo that will ruin him." They walked the gauntlet. To the onlookers it looked like a romantic secret being unveiled. To Elisa it felt like walking through fire and coming out unburnt. They entered the building, leaving the chaos behind them, but the damage was already done. The images were beaming up to satellites, bouncing off servers, and landing on the screens of millions. Inside per se, the atmosphere was hushed reverence. The maitre d' bowed low. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Vance, your table is ready." They were seated by the window overlooking Central Park. The meal was a 9-course tasting menu of oysters and pearls and butter-poached lobster, but Elisa barely tasted it. Her adrenaline was spiking. "Why are you doing this?" she asked midway through the meal, swirling her wine. "I know you respect my coding, Johnny, but this, the dress, the paparazzi, the jet, this is personal. You're attacking Mateo." Johnny set his fork down. His face grew serious, the playfulness vanishing. 6 years ago, Johnny said quietly, Mateo's company acquired a small startup called Bluestream. They stripped it for parts, fired the staff, and bankrupted the founder. The founder committed suicide 3 months later. Elisa gasped. "I remember Bluestream. Mateo said they were incompetent. The founder was my younger brother." Johnny revealed, his voice ice cold. "I was away in Singapore, disconnected. By the time I came back, it was too late. I have been watching Mateo ever since, waiting for him to make a mistake, waiting for a weakness." He looked at Elisa, his eyes softening again. "I didn't expect his weakness to be the fact that he was throwing away the genius behind his success. When I found out you were the one writing the patches and that he was dumping you, the stars aligned, Elisa. I get to avenge my brother, and I get to help you reclaim your life. We are partners in this crime." Elisa stared at him. The narrative shifted. She wasn't just a charity case. She was the weapon. "So," Elisa said, a slow smile spreading across her face, the first genuine smile she had shown in weeks. "How do we destroy him?" Johnny raised his glass. "Check your phone. I believe step 1 is already trending. 3,000 miles away in Seattle, the sun was just coming up." Mateo groaned as he rolled over in bed. His head was pounding from the celebration drinks he'd had the night before. Next to him, Chloe was sprawled out, snoring lightly. The room smelled of her cheap perfume and stale vodka. He sat up, rubbing his temples. The apartment felt different. It was messier. Elisa used to wake up at 6:00 a.m. to make fresh coffee and organize his schedule. Chloe had left her thong on the lampshade and spilled makeup powder on the nightstand. Whatever Mateo thought, small price to pay for freedom. He reached for his phone on the charger. He expected a few emails from his team, maybe a text from his mom. Instead, his lock screen was full. 47 missed calls, 102 text messages, Instagram 99+ notifications. "What the hell?" Mateo muttered, squinting at the screen. The first text was from his VP of sales, a guy named Brad who usually only texted about golf. "Brad, dude, tell me that's not Elisa. Tell me you didn't just fumble the bag of the century." The second text was from his mother. "Mom, call me now." Why is she with him? Mateo unlocked the phone, a pit forming in his stomach. He opened Twitter X. The first thing on his For You page was a picture. It was high resolution, taken under the flashing lights of New York City. A man in a tuxedo looking like a god with his hand on the back of a woman in a midnight blue velvet dress. The woman was looking at the camera with eyes that could cut glass. She looked expensive. She looked powerful. She looked breathtaking. It was Elisa. Mateo blinked. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. It had to be a deepfake. That was Elisa. The woman who wore oversized t-shirts and clipped coupons for groceries. The woman he had just kicked out because she was too plain. She was standing next to Johnny Sterling. Mateo stopped breathing. He knew who Johnny Sterling was. Every tech CEO knew who Johnny Sterling was. He was the Reaper. He was the man who could buy and sell Mateo's company 10 times over before breakfast. Mateo read the caption on the tweet posted by PopCrave, at PopCrave elusive billionaire Johnny Sterling spotted at Per Se in NYC tonight with a stunning mystery woman. Insiders say she's a brilliant strategist. He's been courting for months. The internet is already calling them the new power couple. Johnny Sterling, mystery woman, #NYC. The tweet had 120,000 likes. Mateo's thumb trembled as he scrolled down to the comments. At CryptoKing99. Wait, isn't that Mateo Vantage's girl? The one from Seattle at Tech Insider, replying to at CryptoKing99. Nope. Mateo announced he was single yesterday. Rumor is he dumped her for an influencer. Looks like she upgraded. Majorly. At Slay Queen LMFAO. She packed her bags and went straight to the top of the food chain. We stan. At InvestBro. Johnny Sterling doesn't date. He invests. If he's with her, she's heavy hitter. Who is she really? Mateo felt like he was going to throw up. He shook Chloe awake. Babe, wake up! He hissed. Chloe groaned, smacking her lips. What? It's early. Look at this. He shoved the phone in her face. Chloe squinted, then her eyes widened. Who is that? She's gorgeous. Is that the old lady you lived with? She's not old. Mateo snapped, suddenly defensive. She's 29. She looks like a movie star, Chloe said, sounding jealous. Who is the guy? Is he rich? He's a billionaire, Chloe. He's the billionaire. Mateo threw the phone onto the duvet. He paced the room, running his hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense. She has no money. She has no connections. She took a cab to the airport. How did she get to New York? How does she know Johnny Sterling? His phone rang again. It was his mother. He answered on speaker. Mateo? Linda's voice was shrill. Have you seen the news? It's on Daily Mail. They're calling her the Cinderella of Silicon Valley. They're saying you held her back. People are digging up your old interviews where you didn't mention her. Mom, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. You told me she was a nobody. You said she was going back to the trailer park. Why is she wearing a $50,000 necklace? I don't know, Mateo screamed back. Well, you better figure it out, Linda warned. Because people are starting to talk. They're saying she was the brains behind Vantage Tech. Someone on Reddit just posted a thread comparing her old GitHub commits to your source code. Mateo, did she write the code? Mateo froze. The blood drained from his face. He had always told everyone he wrote the core algorithm. It was the foundation of his reputation. But the truth was, when he was stuck, when the logic broke, when the database crashed, he handed the laptop to Elisa. She would fix it in an hour while he played video games. He never credited her. He never paid her. He just bought her dinner and told her she was a good helper. Mateo, his mother asked, her voice dropping. Did she write it? She helped a little. Mateo stammered. Oh my God, Linda whispered. If Sterling knows that, if she tells him. Mateo hung up. He looked at the panoramic window, the view he was so proud of. Suddenly the apartment felt very small. He ran to the living room, to the spot where Elisa had stood yesterday. He looked for anything she might have left behind. A note. A clue. He found nothing but the empty space where the coffee maker used to be. He opened his laptop and frantically tried to log into the administrative backend of Vantage Tech. He needed to check the logs. He needed to make sure she hadn't taken anything. He typed in his password. Access denied. He typed it again. Access denied. A prompt appeared on the screen. System alert. Unauthorized access attempt. Your administrative privileges have been revoked by the root user. Root user, Matteo whispered. I am the root user. Then a small terminal window popped up on his screen. Green text on a black background. It wasn't a glitch. It was a message. Hello, Matteo. You kept the apartment. I kept the keys to the kingdom. E. Matteo stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. She hadn't just left. She hadn't just upgraded. She had locked him out of his own company. And she was currently eating breakfast with the one man who had the money and the legal team to make sure Matteo never got back in. Matteo slumped into his expensive leather chair, the silence of the apartment now deafening. For the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't the main character of this story. He was just the villain in her origin arc, and the hero had just leveled up. The desperate flight from Seattle to New York was nothing like the private jet experience Elisa had enjoyed. Matteo flew coach middle seat back row near the bathroom because his corporate credit cards had been frozen. The bank had flagged suspicious activity the moment the news of the administrative lockout hit the financial wires. By the time Matteo landed at JFK, he was sweating disheveled and running on pure panic. He had left Chloe back in Seattle. The moment she realized the credit cards were declining at the airport Starbucks, she had hailed an Uber and told him to call her when he was rich again. Matteo didn't care. He had one goal: find Elisa Charm, her apologize and get the password to unlock his company. He convinced himself it was just a tantrum. Elisa was soft. She was the woman who cried during dog food commercials. She wouldn't actually destroy him. She just needed to hear him say he was sorry. He knew where she would be. Tech Weekly had tweeted the agenda for the Innovators Ball at the Met Gala venue that night. Johnny Sterling was the keynote speaker, and according to the press, his mystery muse would be by his side. Matteo spent his last few $100s on a rented tuxedo that didn't fit quite right in the shoulders and a scalped ticket he bought off a shady forum on the dark web. The Met was glowing. Cameras flashed, red carpets rolled, and the air smelled of money and exclusivity. Matteo flashed his ticket, his heart pounding, and pushed past security. He entered the great hall, his eyes darting around the room filled with tech moguls, celebrities, and politicians. And then he saw her. She was standing near the Temple of Dender, illuminated by soft golden lighting. She was wearing a new dress, emerald green silk that flowed like liquid water, backless, exposing the smooth skin he used to take for granted. She was laughing at something a senator was saying, holding a champagne flute with an elegance that made Matteo's chest ache. Johnny was next to her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a silent sentinel. Matteo straightened his bow tie, took a shot of whiskey from a passing waiter's tray to steady his nerves, and marched over. "Elisa!" he called out, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The conversation in the circle died instantly. The senator looked annoyed. Johnny looked bored. Elisa? Elisa just looked at him. "Matteo," she said. Her voice was cool, stripped of the warmth he was used to. "You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Matteo laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Babe, come on! I flew across the country. We need to talk. Privately." He reached out to grab her arm, a reflex from 7 years of ownership. Before his fingers could graze her skin, Johnny's hand shot out. He didn't shove Matteo. He simply clamped his hand around Matteo's wrist. His grip was like a steel vise. "Do not," Johnny said, his voice low and terrifyingly calm, "touch her." Matteo winced, trying to pull his hand back, but he was immovable. "This is between me and my wife, Sterling." "I'm not your wife, Matteo," Elisa said, stepping closer. She wasn't shrinking away. She was looming. "I was your girlfriend of 7 years. I was your maid. I was your cook. And apparently I was your chief technology officer, though I never saw a paycheck." "Elisa, please," Matteo hissed, aware that people were starting to stare. iPhones were being raised. The cameras were recording. Not here. Look, I made a mistake with Chloe. It was stupid. I was stressed. But you locking the system, that's illegal. You're hurting the company. Our company. Our company. Elisa raised an eyebrow. Interesting phrasing. When you sold 10% of the shares last month to buy your mother a beach house, you told me the company was solely your burden. When you accepted the Innovator of the Year award, you thanked your barista but not me. Now it's ours. I built Vantage, Mateo shouted, losing his composure. I did the marketing. I got the investors. You sold the shell, Elisa corrected him, her voice raising just enough to carry across the silent hall. I built the engine. You don't even know what language the core processor is written in, do you, Mateo? Mateo stammered. It's Python. Obviously. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It's written in Rust, Mateo, Elisa said, pity dripping from her tone. I migrated the entire back-end 6 months ago because the Python script you copied from a forum in 2018 was leaking user data. The crowd gasped. A tech CEO not knowing his own stack. That was a death sentence in this room. You're lying. Mateo spat sweat dripping down his forehead. You're a waitress. You served pancakes at Denny's before I saved you. You think these people respect you? They're laughing at you. You're just Sterling's flavor of the week. The room went dead silent. Johnny released Mateo's wrist with a shove that sent him stumbling back. Johnny adjusted his cuffs, his face stone cold. She is not my flavor of the week, Johnny announced, his voice projecting to the rafters. She is my partner, and as of this morning she is the primary consultant for Sterling Ventures. We are launching a new cybersecurity firm next week. The flagship product is an algorithm that detects IP theft. Ironically, we tested it on your company, Mateo. Johnny pulled a folded document from his tuxedo pocket and tossed it at Mateo's feet. You've been served, Johnny said. Mateo stared at the papers on the floor. What is this? A lawsuit? Elisa said, her eyes blazing. For intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of implied contract. I'm not just leaving you, Mateo. I'm taking back my brain. Security guards materialized out of the shadows. Sir, you need to leave, one of them said, grabbing Mateo's arm. No, she's lying. She's crazy, Mateo screamed as he was dragged away, his heels skidding on the polished floor. I made you, Elisa. You're nothing without me, nothing. Elisa watched him go, her expression unreadable. When the doors slammed shut, the silence lingered for a second. Then slowly the senator began to clap. Then Johnny. Then the room erupted in applause. Elisa looked at Johnny. He winked. Showtime, he whispered. But Elisa knew the real battle wasn't at the party. It was going to be in court. Mateo was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. He wouldn't just roll over. He would try to burn her down, even if he had to burn himself with her. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in the Superior Court of Washington was suffocating. The press dubbed it the divorce of the decade, even though they were never married. It was a battle of narratives, the self-made tech bro versus the hidden female genius. Mateo's legal team was aggressive. They were expensive sharks funded by the last of Mateo's dwindling investors who were desperate to salvage the company. Their strategy was simple: discredit Elisa. Paint her as a scorned ex-girlfriend who was vindictive and delusional. Elisa sat at the plaintiff's table next to Johnny's team of corporate litigators. She wore a sharp white suit, a visual contrast to the gray and black of the courtroom. She looked like a CEO. On the witness stand, Mateo looked better than he had at the gala, but his eyes were hollow. He had been coached. Ms. Vance had access to my computer, yes, Mateo testified smoothly. She often used it to shop online or play games. I suspect she installed a keylogger to lock me out as revenge for our breakup. The idea that she wrote the code for Vantage is absurd. She has no formal education in computer science. She is a high school graduate who worked in food service. Mateo's lawyer, a man with an oily smile named Mr. Sterling, no relation to Johnny, much to everyone's amusement, stood up. So, to be clear, Mr. Vantage, you are the sole author of the source code. I am. Mateo lied. I wrote every line. And Ms. Vance? She made the coffee. Mateo smirked. A few of his supporters in the back chuckled. Elisa didn't flinch. She scribbled something on a notepad and slid it to her lead attorney, a razor-sharp woman named Rebecca. Rebecca stood up for the cross-examination. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She walked to the center of the room and plugged her laptop into the courtroom's projector. Mr. Vantage, Rebecca began, you claim you wrote every line of code. That is a statement under oath. Are you aware of the penalties of perjury? I know what I wrote, Mateo said defiantly. Excellent. Then you can explain this. Rebecca hit a key. The projector screen lit up with blocks of complex code. It was the kernel of Vantage Tech's logistics engine. This is Exhibit C, Rebecca said, the source code you submitted to the Copyright Office 3 years ago. Can you talk us through lines 400 through 450? Mateo squinted. He started to sweat. It's a data sorting algorithm. Actually, it's a recursive loop for inventory management, Rebecca corrected. But that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the comments. Encoding programmers leave comments notes within the code that the computer ignores meant for humans to read. Please look at line 412, Rebecca said. It appears to be a variable definition. The screen zoomed in. var favorite memory each 0712-216. What does this date mean, Mateo? Rebecca asked. Mateo froze. I don't recall. Random numbers. Elisa stood up. She didn't ask permission. She just stood. July 12, 2016, Elisa said clearly. It was the day we drove to the coast. It was raining. We ate clam chowder in the car because we couldn't afford a restaurant. You told me you were scared you'd never make it. I told you I would help you build it. Objection, Mateo's lawyer shouted. The witness is testifying. I'm not done, Elisa said, her voice cutting through the objection. Rebecca, execute the command. Rebecca typed a command into the terminal on the screen. Run private key, decrypt favorite memory. The courtroom held its breath. The code on the screen began to shift, the text scrambling and reassembling. It was a hidden function buried so deep inside the architecture that no standard audit would find it. The screen cleared and a single image appeared. It wasn't a logo. It wasn't a graph. It was a scanned image of a napkin, a greasy coffee-stained Denny's napkin. On the napkin, written in blue ballpoint pen, was a diagram of a database structure. The handwriting was looped and feminine, and at the bottom, signed in that same ink property of Elisa Vance. Happy birthday, Mateo. Use this to change the world. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. That, Elisa said, pointing to the screen, is the original architecture. I drew it for you on your 25th birthday because you couldn't figure out how to scale the servers. I scanned it and embedded it into the root directory as a digital watermark. I knew deep down that one day you might try to erase me, so I signed my work. Mateo's face was the color of ash. He slumped in the witness chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Mr. Vantage, the judge spoke, peering over his glasses. Is that your handwriting? No, Mateo whispered. Is that Ms. Vance's handwriting? Mateo looked at Elisa. He looked at Johnny, who was watching him with the cold indifference of an executioner. He looked at the jury, who looked disgusted. Yes, Mateo admitted, his voice cracking. And did you know this file was embedded in the software? No. Then you didn't write it, the judge concluded simply. The gavel didn't bang yet, but the sound of Mateo's career shattering was loud enough for everyone to hear. Johnny leaned over to Elisa. Checkmate, he murmured. Elisa didn't smile. She just felt a massive weight lift off her chest. She looked at Mateo, small and defeated in the big wooden chair. She didn't feel triumph. She felt relief. But the story wasn't over. Mateo had lost the company, but there were still secrets he was hiding. darker secrets involving the money he had secured from overseas investors, investors who were not as forgiving as the American judicial system. As the bailiff moved to recess the court, the doors at the back of the room banged open. 2 men in dark suits entered. They weren't lawyers, and they weren't police. They were FBI. "Mateo Vantage," one of the agents called out, flashing a badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and money laundering involving the Cayman Islands accounts." Elisa turned to Johnny, shocked. "You knew about the laundering." Johnny adjusted his tie. "I told you, Elisa. I check everything." The heavy oak doors of the Superior Court of Washington swung open, and the world exploded into noise. Elisa Vance stepped out onto the granite staircase, and for a moment she was blinded. The camera flashes were relentless, a stroboscopic storm of white light that turned the gray Seattle afternoon into a chaotic premiere. But this wasn't a movie premiere, it was a public execution of a reputation. To her left, the media mob surged against the metal barricades. Reporters were shouting over one another, a cacophony of questions that merged into a singular roar. "Elisa, is it true you controlled the back end for 3 years? Mateo, look this way. Did you defraud the investors?" "Ms. Vance, are you taking over Vantage Tech?" Elisa didn't answer. She stood tall in her white suit, a beacon of calm amidst the frenzy. Next to her, Johnny Sterling was an anchor, his presence dark and formidable. He didn't shield her, he didn't need to. He simply stood beside her, letting the world see that they were equals. But the cameras quickly shifted their focus. Behind them, flanked by 4 federal agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI, was Mateo Vantage. He looked nothing like the arrogant tech mogul who had sneered at Elisa in their penthouse weeks ago. The bespoke Italian suit he wore was rumpled. His tie was loose. His face was a mask of shock, pale and sweating. But the most jarring detail was the silver handcuffs binding his wrists behind his back. As the agents guided him down the stairs toward a waiting black SUV, the crowd went wild. "Mateo!" a reporter from CNBC yelled, shoving a microphone toward him. "The SEC is claiming $40 million in laundered funds through shell companies in the Caymans. Do you have a comment?" Mateo looked up. His eyes frantically scanned the crowd, looking for a friendly face, looking for an exit. They landed on Elisa. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. Mateo stopped walking, forcing the agents to tug at his arm. He looked at the woman he had discarded, the woman he had called a mouse. He looked at the diamonds around her neck and the man standing beside her. In that look there was no anger. There was only a terrifying, hollow realization. He hadn't just lost a girlfriend. He hadn't just lost a company. He had lost the very architect of his existence. "Elisa," he mouthed. The sound was swallowed by the noise of the crowd, but she saw the shape of his lips. Elisa didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply watched him with the detached curiosity one might have when observing a car crash on the highway. "Keep moving!" the lead agent barked, shoving Mateo's head down to protect him as they shoved him into the back seat of the vehicle. The heavy door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in Elisa's bones. The SUV peeled away, sirens wailing, cutting a path through the sea of press. "You knew," Elisa said softly, her voice barely audible over the shouting reporters. She didn't look at Johnny. She kept her eyes on the taillights of the retreating SUV. "You knew the FBI was coming today." Johnny adjusted his cufflink, his expression unbothered. Mateo was sloppy, Elisa. Arrogance makes men careless. He used the same password for his illegal offshore accounts that he used for his Netflix login. When you unlocked the system with that napkin scan, you didn't just prove ownership of the code. You opened a window into his entire digital soul. I simply ensured the window was facing the Department of Justice. He turned to her, his blue eyes sharp and serious. "He stole your mind, Elisa. It was only fair that he paid with his freedom." The weeks that followed were a blur of destruction and rebirth. The collapse of Vantage Tech was swift and brutal. It was a case study in corporate implosion that business schools would teach for decades. With the CEO indicted on 12 counts of wire fraud and money laundering, and the revelation that the core IP belonged to an ex-partner, confidence in the company evaporated overnight. The stock, which had traded at $145 a share, plummeted to $0.12 in pre-market trading the following Monday. Elisa watched it all from a distance. She saw the news footage of employees walking out of the headquarters carrying cardboard boxes, an ironic echo of her own departure. But unlike her, they had severance packages. Mateo had nothing. Karma, however, wasn't finished. It had one more stop to make. 3 weeks after the arrest, a video surfaced on TikTok that went viral within hours. It was filmed by a neighbor in an upscale suburb. The shaky footage showed a tow truck backing into a driveway, Linda Vantage's driveway. Linda, Mateo's mother, was screaming. She was wearing a silk robe, clutching a Louis Vuitton bag as if it were a life preserver. "You can't take it!" Linda shrieked at the repo man who was hooking chains to the axle of her white Mercedes. "My son is Mateo Vantage. Do you know who he is? He owns this city." "Lady," the repo man said, looking tired, "your son owns a jail cell. The bank owns the car. Step back." As the car was hoisted into the air, Linda turned to the person filming. "Stop filming. We are good people. She did this. That waitress did this." The video ended with Linda sitting on the curb weeping into her hands. Elisa watched the video on her tablet in the quiet of her new living room. She expected to feel a surge of triumph. Linda had tormented her for 7 years, belittling her family, mocking her clothes, treating her like hired help. Seeing her humbled should have felt like victory. Instead, Elisa just felt done. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, empty space where she could finally build something new. She closed the video. "Goodbye, Linda," she whispered. 6 months later. The elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor of the newly constructed Sterling Vance Tower in downtown Seattle. The space was breathtaking, an open-concept cathedral of glass and steel bathed in natural light. It didn't smell of fear or ego. It smelled of potential. Elisa walked through the bustling office. Dozens of engineers, many of them women she had personally recruited, looked up and nodded with respect as she passed. They weren't afraid of her. They were inspired by her. She reached her corner office, a space 3 times the size of Mateo's old penthouse living room. The desk was made of reclaimed timber, sleek and modern. On the wall behind it, framed in simple black wood, was the original Denny's napkin. It was a reminder. Never forget where you started. Never let anyone erase your name. She sat down and opened her laptop. The beta results for Aegis, their new AI-driven cybersecurity platform, were incredible. They had already secured contracts with 3 major banks and a defense contractor. The company was projected to hit $1 billion valuation before the end of the fiscal year. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Elisa glanced at it. It was a number she had deleted, but one she still recognized. Unknown number L. "Please, I know you blocked my other number. I'm using a burner phone a guard smuggled in." Elisa stared at the screen. She should delete it, but curiosity, that old ghost, made her open the message. Unknown number. "The trial starts next week. They're offering a plea deal, but it's 15 years L. 15 years. I'm scared. Chloe sold a story to TMZ about me being abusive. Mom won't answer my calls because she's living in a motel and blames me. I have nobody." Unknown number. "I just wanted to say, you were right. About the rain. About the chowder. That was the best day. I should have married you then. I'm so sorry. Can you help me?" Just a character reference. Anything. Elisa read the words. She felt the ghost of the girl she used to be. The girl who would have dropped everything to save him. The girl who packed boxes in silence because she thought she deserved the pain. But that girl didn't live here anymore. Mateo didn't want forgiveness. He wanted a lifeline. He was drowning, and he was reaching for the only person who had ever learned how to swim in his chaos. Elisa typed a response. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "I forgive you." She looked at the words, then she backspaced. I hope you find peace. She backspaced again. She realized she didn't need to say anything. Her silence had been her exit. Her silence had been her weapon. And now her silence was her final answer. She selected the message thread. Delete. Block caller. She set the phone down just as the office door opened. Johnny walked in. He looked different than he had in the beginning. The sharp, predatory edge of the Wolf of Wall Street had softened into something warmer, something more collaborative. He was holding a bottle of vintage Krug and 2 crystal flutes. The Asian market's just closed, Johnny said, a grin spreading across his face. Aegis is up 40%. The IPO is oversubscribed by a factor of 10. Elisa, we're not just a unicorn, we're a dynasty. He placed the glasses on her desk and popped the cork. The sound was a sharp, festive pop that signaled the end of the old era. Elisa stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Seattle lay spread out below her, a grid of lights twinkling in the twilight. Somewhere down there in a concrete cell, Mateo was sitting in the dark. Somewhere down there, Linda was learning to live with less. But up here, the air was clear. Johnny walked up beside her. He handed her a glass. He didn't try to touch her or claim the moment for himself. He simply stood with her, looking out at the empire she had built with her own mind. You know, Johnny said quietly, they're calling you the Iron Queen in the press. They say you came out of nowhere. Elisa swirled the champagne, watching the bubbles rise. Let them talk. I like the noise. To silence, Johnny asked, raising his glass, a callback to the toast they had made on the jet when she was broken and fleeing. Elisa shook her head. She turned to him, her eyes bright with a fire that would never be extinguished again. No, Johnny, she said, her voice steady and strong. To never being silent again. They clinked glasses, the crystal chiming like a bell. Outside, the city lights burned bright, but inside the office, Elisa Vance burned brighter. She had packed her things in silence, yes, but she had unpacked a revolution. And that is the story of how Elisa Vance packed her things in silence and made the whole world listen to her roar. She proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting the loudest, but the one who knows where all the bodies, or in this case the code, are buried. Mateo learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the person who builds your empire for free. What do you think of Elisa's revenge? Was it too harsh, or did Mateo get exactly what he deserved? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and corporate takedowns, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next drama-filled saga. Until next time.